Hello, this is a brief overview of the OpenScales project. OpenScales is an open repository for psychological scales and also an open scale definition file format that we represent these scales in. I'm Shane Mueller. I'm a professor at Michigan Technological University, and I'm also the developer of the PEBL system. It's a computer-based system for computerized testing of a lot of behavioral tests, usually more perceptual and memory tests. And although we've implemented some scales within PEBL, I've usually shied away from them because although you can implement a memory test without worrying about copyright infringement, a scale is usually a copyrighted instrument, and someone owns it, and you can't just make copies and distribute it that easily. But as I began building online versions for PEBL and having surveys seems to be more important there. This is sort of my response to trying to provide a large set of useful psychological scales in an open source and public domain manner. So really, I got into this because the state of scales in psychological research is really a mess. If you want to find a scale, it could be scattered across PDFs, appendices of papers, scanned PDFs that you have to type in yourself, that in random orders in tables, in a factor analysis in a paper, sometimes on an author's website. There's no standard way of representing these things. And especially even there are platforms like RedCap or Qualtrics that are widely used for survey type research, but there's no easy way to share between them because they want to prevent you from using other systems. There are a number of places like APA Psych Tests that aggregate a lot of scales, sometimes I think tens of thousands, but they're paywalled, and other ones that are out there that I'm not going to identify are probably violating copyright by publishing the copyrighted content of scales. So what researchers who want to use these have to find the test items, re-implement them, figure out the scoring schemes, including subscales and reverse coding and other things like that. These are often buried in SPSS syntax or in the journal methods section. If you want to translate it, there's no easy way to exchange these. Sometimes they exist, but they're hard to find. They're not easily aligned with the other logic. And for all of these, the licensing status is often really unclear, especially for older, widely used scales that are, more than 20 years old before a lot of things began being published with Creative Commons. Really, oftentimes these are owned by either the university or the publisher, but people don't even recognize this, and authors themselves don't understand the copyright issues. They often publish with a blanket disclaimer about non-commercial use, or they restrict the use and distribution in ways that maybe don't make a lot of sense. Users then often ignore these restrictions. I've seen people publish copyrighted scales in their method section or in their appendices, which is probably a violation of copyright. Maybe it's part of the fair use exemption. People constantly ask permission from authors, and that becomes a huge burden if they just want everyone to use it. And the legal issues here are really quite murky. Maybe people really have the right to use these things that are published through the fair use doctrine, but this is legally untested, but it can still be very impactful. There's scales like the mini mental state exam that were copyrighted, and after it became widely used, a publisher sold the rights and required people to license it in order to use it. So altogether, this is a huge impact on transparency in science, in open science, and I think even contributes to the replicability crisis, because it really doesn't matter if you have a well defined and validated scale if you get the text wrong or score it wrong. So what is OpenScales? It's a community repository of open. By open, I mean Creative Commons license, public domain, or otherwise deemed redistributable psychological scales in a standard JSON format. Currently, we have over 500, maybe over 550 scales defined in the OSD format. This is a runner agnostic specification for scales that can be used for any scale, open or closed. The OSD file is self-contained. It has the structure of the scale, the scoring, the text and translations. And so a runner can use some or all of this in order to provide the participant what they need to respond, and also then do scoring and compare and report generation and data saving. We also have some software. We include a web runner via JavaScript. Via the PEBL system, we have desktop and online runners. We have a PDF generator, and we have a number of format converters to other commonly used platforms. So the OSD format looks like this on the right. It's readable. It's human readable and human editable. Includes scale metadata like the name, the citation, the license. It has different item definitions, scoring, computed variables, also norms, so you can give interpretations of values, embed multiple embedded language translations. And this was designed while implementing hundreds of scales, and so it can't implement everything that anyone has ever thought of to put into a scale, but it's sufficient for the vast majority of scales that are out there. And although you could do it by hand, we provide a tool within PEBL and the PEBL launcher, which I call the Scale Builder, which creates a properly formatted OSD file if you want to implement it yourself. It also, if you point an LLM to the specification and some examples, it can do a really good job of implementing these based on the text from a paper. These scales should be able to run basically anywhere. In the browser, I'll show you how you can do it without any server needed, but we also have ways that you can set up your own server to upload and download data, or combine multiple scales together for a more complex experiment. I also offer a PEBL version, which you can run on the desktop for offline administration, but there's also a way of doing this within the online version of PEBL at PEBL Hub Online. We provide export to a number of formats like REDCap, Qualtrics, Lime Survey. These are usually not going to be fully incorporate all of the content of the scale, but as much as is feasible. Usually these won't incorporate scoring, for example. But of course, we would gladly accept contributions like additional scale runners and converters for other experiment systems and importers for other survey systems. So the scale repository currently has 554 scales. We categorize them across 13 domains just to make searching easy. Almost 200 are clearly Creative Commons or public domain licensed. Another few hundred are come from other sources. A lot of these public domain come from the IPIP personality scales, or organizations like WHO, RAND, Pfizer, and the US government who release their scales public domain. Almost 400 come from the NIH Phoenix Toolkit measures. These are auto-converted, so sometimes the quality is a little limited, but Phoenix distributes and allows for free use and of these 360 some scales. The license status is documented for all the scales. We can run interactively at the OpenScales website and have code for checking the compliance to see if the version you have actually works. So that's a basic overview of the project. If you want to get involved, please use OpenScales. You can browse, find scales that are useful for you, maybe as an alternative to older proprietary scales. We would love you to contribute your own scales, either ones you've already published or ones before you publish. Even if you've published a scale in a standard journal, you can relicense your scale via a Creative Commons license so that others can use it in the future. We love new scale runner apps for your own platforms. We love help testing and verifying the items and scoring and copyright status of the scales we distribute, documenting licensing status, and suggesting features that you would find useful. So just for a short overview of the website, this is the OpenScales website. If you go to browse, we have the scales organized in a number of different separate repositories. All of these should be downloadable via GitHub, so you can clone this repository and get them all at once. The scales, the OSD files include all information that is then presented in when you browse any individual scale, so we can see the items, the copyright status, the citation, and things like that. A link to a DOI to the paper. If we want to look at it, we could check out the printed version. This is what it would look like if we printed it, so you can get a glance at it really quickly, or we could run it online. This is the JavaScript runner, which is available via PEBL Hub or for download here, or you can run it straight from the OpenScales site. When you run it straight from OpenScales, it doesn't save anything. It has this demo mode. This would be useful in a classroom, for example, if you're just evaluating it. So this is a simple Likert scale with four items. And at the end of this, it lets you, because it's the demo mode, it lets you download the data or the report individually. You could really run a study this way and have people email their reports to you or their data files. This HTML formatted report calculates things like the scores for different dimensions, recoding if necessary. And then this is, I think, version 2.5 of the PEBL launcher, and it has a tab for scales and surveys. There is a location that this looks for if you want to use this for an OpenScales project. You can copy the OSD file in here, but this just shows how we have ways of implementing all the questions, editing them, implementing dimension, scoring, translations, randomizing at the section level, incorporating parameters, and a lot of other scale information about the scale for users to be able to document what exactly the scale is doing. So that's it for the overview of the OpenScales project. Please come and check it out and contribute if you can. Thanks.